Yeah. So what the research shows is that the majority of our friendships don't last a lifetime. They're usually just for some amount of time that could be short, right? And they usually end through fading away. They typically do not end with a breakup, although that does happen. Most friendships end simply through fading out. And so just keep that in mind. Like if you've ever felt like, oh, my friendships are fading away, it's like, that's okay. That's completely normal. And in fact, the average American adult loses 1 to 3 friendships a year, 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, typically,
wow.
again, also through fading away. It's not often a big blowout. It's usually like it just fizzles. And then one day you wake up and you're like, I don't know if I can reach out to that person. It's been a long time.
Welcome to Growing Through It, a podcast that supports you through the challenges, obstacles, and adversities of life. How can you come out the other side of hard times stronger and more resilient? That's what this podcast is all about. Your host, Jen Arnold, will guide you through life's challenges with expert advice and honest conversations. Don't just go through it, grow through it.
Welcome to the Growing Through It podcast. We're here with Kat Vellos, speaker and author of the book, We Should Get Together, The Secret to Cultivating Better Friendships. She's also the creator of the Better Than Small Talk conversation cards and the Better Conversations calendar. In Kat's former career, she was a user experience designer where she researched, designed, and advised on the user experience of apps and websites serving millions of people at companies like Slack and Pandora. Kat, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jan. Thanks for having me on.
Well, now that listeners know about you professionally, why don't you tell us a personal fun fact about yourself?
So yeah, this one's pretty funny. A very, very long time ago, long before I got into user experience design, I once made a CD for kids to learn their multiplication tables. And believe it or not, the album's single went to the #1 spot on Sirius XM Kids and Family Radio. And it was a song about the 5 times tables. And you can still find it. You can stream it. It's out there. It's called Musicplication. And it is like probably the nerdiest fun I've ever done on a project in my life.
Okay. A few questions about that. First of all, I've written it down because pretty soon my 5-year-old will be doing some multiplication. So, that will come in handy. But what got you even started into doing something like that? Is music like a thing for you?
No, it's not. So at the time, this was ages ago, I had signed up to do a program called AmeriCorps, which is, for those who aren't familiar, it's like the Peace Corps, but it's domestic. And there's all different kinds of programs from like disaster preparedness to education to health, like all kinds of stuff. And I was in an education program. And I was assigned to an elementary school where I was supposed to help kids with reading and math. And much to my horror, I had been assigned to like run this like after school math club. Because when I was growing up, I hated math. Like I hated it so much. And I struggled with it. It was really hard for me. And I was like, I even felt like anxious of like, how am I going to teach math? I don't even like math. And I had these really sweet kids and they were having a really hard time with their multiplication tables. And I could really empathize with them. And I tried to look for like other kinds of cool classroom materials to bring in. And I was looking for like music, like they were really into singing and dancing. And like they would come in singing songs off the radio. They could memorize lyrics to songs. But they seem to have trouble memorizing their times tables. And so I tried to find it. It did not exist. The stuff from the 70s, like Schoolhouse Rock and stuff, like they were just like, no, Miss Cat, like we're not into that.
Not happening.
It was just not cool. And so a friend of mine who is a DJ, we had done some smaller kind of like projects just for fun. And I asked him, I said, hey, can I use some of your beats to make an album about math for these kids I'm working with? And he was like, oh my God, yes, because he used to teach art in a kindergarten. And so he had a soft spot for kids too. And so we ended up doing this album, honestly, just for my like kids at my math club. And then I was like, well, let me share it with other people. And I like sent it to Sirius XM. I was like, maybe your people want to listen to this. And they were like, oh my God, we love it. And then like, yeah, the single was a song about the 5 times tables. And it ended up hitting the chart and like was on the chart for a while. And then it hit number one and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So yeah, that's a very long answer to your question of like how that happened. But it's pretty deep in the deep freeze of things I've done. But every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of a fun fact. I did that thing.
That's a fun fact. That's something you should put on your resume. Who the hell has a resume anymore? I don't know, but it's something that you brag about. That's amazing.
Well, it's just funny because it doesn't fit in with the whole rest of the story of like what my career is. It was just like this thing I did like kind of randomly at a very unique moment in time, but it's not like a part of like the narrative of what I do. I'm not a singer, like, although you can make an album even if you're not a singer.
Thank God for auto-tune and all of the other things they've got going on. Yes.
Yeah. So like, it's just kind of a thing to say, like, if you want to make something, it's okay to do it, even if it doesn't, like, it's not your job title or it's not like your career or it's not your number one focus in life. Like you can still play around and try things and meet a need if you see a need needs to be met.
Yeah, I love that. And your only outcome was trying to help these kids with their math. So it's not like you were saying like, this got to go to number one. This is really important for me, right? It was just like this thing you did to help the kids. That's a fantastic story. Thanks for sharing that, Kat.
Thank you.
So you go from that music to user experience and then writing about cultivating better friendships, which I've read a little bit on your website about what prompted you to write about cultivating better friendships. But tell the listeners, like, how did you even get started in that as an interest area? And now it's your business.
Yeah. So friendship has always been really, really important to me. Growing up, I moved around a lot. And what that meant was I was always starting over with the experience of like making friends or finding belonging. And I was also really shy as a kid. I'm not shy now, although I am an introvert. And so I had always had this experience of being like, oh, it's like hard to be the new kid. But then eventually in high school, I like made really, really, really good friends. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And from that moment, I like held a very, very strong connection to the meaning and purpose and depth of what it means to have close friends. And, you know, to me, and not just to me, but the research proves this out, is that friendships really are one of the most important forms of relationship in our life. So they are relationships of choice, unlike family, where you might have an obligation based on blood. With relationships of choice, whether they're romantic or platonic, you know that the commitment isn't just based on like, you have to be here because of like who you were born to, right? Mm-hmm. You choose to be there. And this commitment really shows to me that at their core, there's like a purity and a goodness to two people being like, I want to be in your life. And you're like, yeah, I want to be in your life too. And we're going to bring light to each other's life. We're going to help each other grow. We're going to help each other learn. We're going to try to keep each other safe and healthy. We're going to help each other through hard times. We're going to share this journey of life together. And that to me is just like one of the most beautiful things that we can do with each other. And of course, as I dug into the research on this, writing the book, I also learned that it's not only the good feelings that we get from friendships, but it's actually a significant part of our health and well-being, our physical health, our mental health, emotional health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I feel like, you talked about high school and in school, you've got all the kids there to make friends. It's hard enough though. I'm not saying it's easy. Believe me, I got 2 kids in school, but then we get into adulthood. College, if you go to college, that's a way to make friends. And then even in the working world, you can make friends. But what happens to the types of relationships or friendships that we have as we age into adulthood?
Yeah, there's some really fascinating research on this by a website that's called ourworldindata.org. And they've done many different kinds of studies, but one that I find really answers this question is they have a timeline that shows how much time we spend with others in our life. They've done a massive time use survey. And what we find is that we typically spend time with 6 categories of people: friends, family, coworkers, children, your partner. And the last one is actually spending time alone. Being with yourself is also a relationship. And what we see is that in adolescence, we spend the most of our time with our parents, our siblings, and our friends. And when we get into adulthood, we spend most of our time with our coworkers, our partners, and children, if you choose to have them in your life. And in our later years, very end, at the end of life, we spend increasing amounts of time alone. And the time with friends, when you look at the chart, the time with friends, the peak at the very, very top It's typically around age 18. And then it drops until you hit your mid-30s, and then it kind of plateaus at this lower level pretty much until the end of life, unless two things happen. The first is if you take action to purposely, intentionally spend more time with your friends during your free time, or if the people who are your co-workers become good friends, because let's be real, you're going to spend a whole lot of time with them. And that's why it's really important to think about cultivating relationships and friendships at work and having really healthy teams. Because even if you say, like, I don't go to work to make friends, I go to work, the truth is that healthy colleagueships share many of the exact same traits with healthy friendships, and they can provide much the same benefit. And so keeping that in mind, I would encourage any of the listeners to really think about, how are you spending your time? And is it providing the depth and access to the relationships you want to be cultivating?
Yes. And that resonates, because as I was looking back, we moved to the area a year ago, and I haven't found really many friends here. And I look back at the friends I had in North Carolina, and I was like, wow, when I worked in corporate, like, that's where I made so many of my friends. Mm-hmm. And I can tie a lot of them back to that job, because I was there for 8 years and made a lot of friends. And now that I work for myself, it's much, much harder. Now that I've got kids, it's much, much harder. And now that I'm moving to, I've moved to a new area where I know no one, it's been hard. So those are my personal challenges. But it also just feels awkward to try to make friends as adults. And like, talk about some of the challenges that we face. I just mentioned mine, but am I alone in that, or are there similar challenges out there for the other people?
You're definitely not alone, Jen. And in fact, your story captures multiple of the 4 biggest buckets of challenges that I describe in the book when it comes to making friends as adulthood. So for folks who are listening, the book looks at the 4 main challenges of friendship and then how to overcome them, and then has a lot of also success stories and things that you can learn from, and different challenges and lots of cool activities, depending on whatever your personality is, on how you want to approach solving that problem. So it's not just oh, everything sucks, it's hard. It's actually here's what's hard. Here's what also works for people. And here's things that you can do. So the 4 main challenges that I describe in the book, and I synthesized this while I was researching between 2015 to 2019, basically. And the 4 challenges are hypermobility, busyness, partnership, like having a grown-up relationship or starting a family. And then the last is difficulty establishing intimacy. And with those 4 things, it doesn't mean necessarily that those are bad things. Certainly partnership is not a bad thing. Choosing to have kids is not a bad thing. But what it means is it takes away a lot of time from the friends bucket, right? The time you have to spend with your friends. And same thing, hypermobility, right? We move many more times in our life and at a greater frequency than people used to in the past. And what that means is that people often leave behind their friends, or they feel left behind when their friends move away. And you got to start over. Just like you said, you moved to a place, you didn't know anybody, you're starting over, and it feels kind of awkward. And it's sometimes unclear for folks when they land somewhere. Are the people around me open to making new friends? Are they open to making friends with someone who just moved here? Or are they already set with their friends and they're kind of closed off, And different cities also have different personalities. There's a great book that I reference in my book by Richard Florida called Who's Your City? And in it, they describe this incredible research study that was done to overlay psychology's big 5 personality traits on regions of the United States. And it is really, really interesting to understand how different regions and different cities actually do have different personalities, and it can greatly impact how much you feel like you fit in your environment. And then
I'm sorry. Let me interrupt, because I'm getting that book. That is fascinating. And we were, sorry, let me get back to me, Kat. Hold on.
Sure.
So we traveled in an RV for 18 months. So we left North Carolina. I'm from the Southeast. I'm, really used to the Southern hospitality. And then we found an area. We've always been fascinated by the West. And so we settled outside of Las Vegas, and I miss the Southern hospitality. I love the sunshine. I love how beautiful it is here. I love the geography, but I am really feeling I don't know, part of it is, does the city match what I need and my family needs? Or is it just the discomfort of doing something completely different in a city that is just it's just different, right? So do I just give myself time to adapt, or is it just not my city? So you don't need to answer that if you don't want to, but I'm getting, besides your book, I'm going to get this book as well. That sounds perfect for me.
And a lot of times it could be a little bit of both, right? It could be a little bit of trying to figure out your environment and where your people are in that environment. And it could also be a bit of, needing to step outside your comfort zone, or to really be proactive around saying like, wow, I noticed there's a game night at this bubble tea shop on Thursdays every week at 7 p.m. And I'm going to make myself get up and go multiple weeks in a row so that I can become a regular, so that I can make some friends. I've worked with a lot of people on cultivating friendships in adulthood. I do that sometimes in a coaching capacity, either one-on-one or as a group. And I also do friendship matchmaking activities. And so I work with people on like, meeting people is different from making friends. And what frequently happens, especially when we're in a new environment, is we meet a lot of people. We might go to a one-off event, go to a concert, go to a gathering. But if it's a one-off, it's going to be a lot harder than if you do something that's ongoing or regular. And you're going to have to take a lot more of the initiative to reach out to people and have the courage to say like, hey, I liked meeting you. Can we hang out again? And it is a little bit like dating. It is much different than being in school, where you're just in class every day with each other and you're like, I'm going to see you tomorrow. You got to make that happen. As on your own in adulthood.
Yes. And so, yes, it is. And I definitely have taken action, because you can't sit there obviously and complain about not finding friends, and they're not going to come knock on your door. So you do need to go out. And I also think, and I'd be curious of your opinion on this, is recovering from experiences that don't go well. For example, I exchanged numbers with a mom at my kid's school. She seemed really cool. She was new here, and then arranged a play date, and I was really excited. And then it was just a really bad mismatch. And the way that I'll put it is that she didn't believe women should be leaders.
Oh boy.
So let's just say that. So very, like our political stance was completely off. Like everything was off. And so great. It was a little awkward after that, but we're like, okay, we never contacted each other again. But then it's, how do you recover going? Because in a way, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, that didn't go well. The people here I don't know about them. So how do you also recover from experiences that don't meet maybe your expectations or your hopes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's real. Gosh, that must have been so awkward. I don't know what I would have done if someone said that to me. I'd be like, what?
Well, the kicker was, it was really kind of funny, because I didn't tell anything. They didn't ask what I do or, anything like that. But as we're leaving, the husband's like, well, Jen, what do you do? I was like, oh, I own a company. And I walked out the door. We're done here.
You're like, I'm living proof that what you just said doesn't even exist. Like,
exactly. So thank God she knew better than to contact me. And it was kind of thank God really, it was mutually like, this isn't going to work. But yeah.
Yeah. In some ways friendship is sometimes like when you're trying to meet people and make new friends, sometimes it's like a numbers game. Like you're going to strike out a lot. And you got to just like roll with it and like not take it personal, and know that like it would be kind of miraculous to like ask one person to hang out and then like, wow, oh my God, we're best friends. Like sometimes it's going to be weird. Like you're not going to be a fit. It's a lot like dating. You're going to go on a lot of first dates, and you're not going to find somebody that you're like ready to like be lifetime friends with, because you're going to be like, cool, it was nice meeting you. And like, good luck with your UFO observation lab or whatever you're doing. And so, yeah, just having a sense of humor. I think it's great that you have a sense of humor about this experience that you had, and acknowledging that like, wow, this is an experiment. I'm going to meet a lot of different kinds of people. If it doesn't go well, at least I'll have a good story afterwards.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm just going to get up and try again tomorrow. And this comes up a lot when I work with people around the concept of invitations and like being invitational. Because that's often a big part of it too, is like there needs to be a certain level of openness and experimentation where you're like willing to put yourself out there, invite somebody to spend time with you, or invite them into your life for a moment to see if it's a fit, and to know that it's perfectly okay to have boundaries about who you want to be friends with. You're not obligated to be friends with every single person that you meet. And it's okay to be like, it was really nice meeting you. I don't think we're a fit, and best of luck to you or whatever. And that's okay. And you might have to say that numerous times until you find the ones that are the right match, unless you're like somehow able to filter upfront a little bit more clearly. So like maybe if you went to a networking event for women business owners in your city, like there's like a filter in advance that like will probably say you wouldn't end up in that same conversation with these group of folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm guessing, like you said earlier, like there's a difference between meeting people and then actually becoming friends with them. And then you also said going to something on a regular basis. And so I guess what I'm assuming it's almost like you are dating someone to see if that initial like interactions would lead to, oh, let's hang out again and let's hang out again. And then it just evolves naturally. I mean, could you compare it to dating?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. Except it's kind of like a more like polyamorous kind of dating where like you don't just make one friend and then you're like not allowed to have any other friends. If anyone ever does that to you, they are not a good friend. Don't be friends with them.
That's creepy, yeah.
Because like it's great because you can have many different friends at many different levels of intensity. And it's actually quite important for our well-being that we do.
Yeah. And let's talk about different versions of friendships. Like even back in Raleigh where I lived, I had kind of buckets of friends, and it wasn't purposeful or intentional, but like, here are my work friends and here are my running friends. Here are my friends of the kids' parents, so everyone kind of had a group. Again, it wasn't intentional, but do we need different types of friends? Is it just a reality of how we form friendships?
It's definitely a reality. And there's certainly nothing wrong, right, with having compartmentalized friendships that are kind of segmented according to the different areas of your life, whether that's exercise or you have like some friends you go to happy hour with, or you have your work friends. You might have a friend you do a hobby or a craft with. You might also have friends that are a part of an education group, whether you do higher ed or do like some kind of continuing education. And this is really useful, right? Because one of the things it does is it allows us to express and to develop specific parts of our identity. And when you do that in a setting with other people who share that particular identity or that particular activity, you're in already a compatible setting where you're going to be supported. The downside of doing too much of this, though, is that it can lead to this sort of fractured feeling where it feels like there's no one person who understands all of you because they're only seeing a slice of you in that very compartmentalized interaction or friendship or event or whatever it might be. And where I've seen that surfaces for people in the interviews that I did for the book is that they will something will happen, like say a very big milestone birthday party, and they want to invite all the people that they know, but it feels very disorienting to suddenly have all these different circles of their life overlapping in the Venn diagram. For some people, it's joyful and they're like, wow, this is so exciting. And for other people, it's anxiety producing to be like, I don't know what's going to happen when my work friends meet my friends from CrossFit or whatever. And the other way that this can sometimes prove challenging is that when folks have told me that they found themselves in a time of need, for example, like let's say going through a really bad breakup or losing a loved one and being in a time of grief, like they're crying, they need support, and they actually don't know who they can call because you're like, well, I know that person from CrossFit, but can I call them to like cry on their shoulder about my breakup? That feels weird because like our friendship is like this very strictly limited to the category of like we exercise together. And so if the relationship is like too narrow, then it can lead to this feeling of like, wow, I know all these people, but I actually don't know who I can turn to when I want to get support around something that falls outside the realm of that category of friendship.
Mm-hmm. And how do you been thinking where to go with this next question, because it is very easy to stay on the surface of relationships and friendships, right? So we work out together. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about running is you have a lot of time. So you talk about a lot of stuff, a lot of heavy shit. Good. So that's always good, but that doesn't always transpire. So if I'm assuming it is the best if we have someone that we can lean on in the hard times. And I guess, how do you get beyond the surface level I mean, I'm imagining there are some internal barriers that people have to get past to even show that part of themselves, because I do think it's easy to stay surfacey with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, especially in our modern culture of like always having to project success and happiness at all times or whatever, especially online and social media. But I appreciate your example around being in the running group where you have so much time together that you can get into the deep stuff and like really talk. And I imagine that would be different, say, if you were in a swimming league or something where like you cannot speak to this person while you're exercising at the same time. And so like, it's fascinating to me, like the designer in my brain is thinking about the design of these interactions and the design of the setting and the design of the, like what is possible in that time and space together and what is not possible and what's a fit and what can you do. And I think that that's a level of granularity that maybe it would be good for folks to practice if you're like finding yourself in a situation where like, well, I'm not sure how to do this. And it's like, well, take a look at the setting, take a look at the environment, take a look at what you can and cannot do. Can you have a conversation? Are you going to be interrupted every 2 minutes so you can't really get deep? Or are you going to have a longer stretch of time where you can tell something more involved or more complex? And I think having an awareness around that is a big deal. And then when you find yourself in a place where you do have that opportunity, then comes the step of, how am I going to show up here? How am I going to invite this closeness to the other person? How am I going to bring my curiosity and my questions? Are we just going to make small talk about like the typical, warm up questions everybody uses, or will we go deeper, And I'm a big, as you know, from the Better Than Small Talk questions and the Better Conversations calendar, like this is an area of life that I never get tired of, which is thinking about the way we use our words to invite closer, more meaningful, or more surprising conversations.
Can you dig into that a little bit more? I know you're in the midst of packing up your calendars, and by the time this airs, I'm guessing you'll sell out of them. But can you talk a little bit about that? Like, just even if it's opening the door to maybe a question or two someone could ask instead of the how are yous.
Yeah. So there's many ways to do this. And for folks who are listening, they're like, what is she talking about? What is this calendar? So during the pandemic, I got really tired of the question, how are you? Particularly after the killing of George Floyd. And I had a lot of people who were well-intentioned in wanting to reach out to me, asking me, how are you? How are you? How are you? And I was like, well, make an educated guess. How do you think I am? I'm probably grieving. I'm probably angry. I'm probably sad. Why do I have to explain that to you over and over and over again? It's actually really tiring. And the other way we use how are you is as a greeting. That's not really a question, where like someone's just saying it kind of like the way you'd say good morning, but they're not actually ready to listen to like the full, long, potentially complicated answer of how I am. And so I ended up doing this blog post, and it resonated with a lot of people who interestingly said they felt the same way. I was kind of like nervous. I was like, are people going to think I'm like rude or something, that I don't like this question? But a lot of people connected. And so I made a tool that was just like, here's a month's worth of alternatives to how are you? Some of them aren't even questions. They're just greetings. Like you can just say like, hey, it's good to see you again. Or like, hey, what's one thing you liked about your morning, or whatever it might be. And it just kind of interrupts the script. And it makes it clear that you're either A, giving a greeting, like good afternoon, or you're asking a question that clearly is not a greeting because it's a very specific question, like what's one thing you liked about your day so far? And I really believe that when we bring just a small shift in how we choose to open our conversations and then work our way through those conversations, we show up in different ways and we wake up in different ways in our conversations. And so anyway, long story short, I ended up doing a whole calendar. There's 12 months, and each month has alternatives to a typical small talk question. So like a month of alternatives to what's new, a month of alternatives to how was school today, a month of alternatives to how was work today, a month of alternatives to certainly how are you? There's also alternatives to things that are seasonal, like around this time of the year, many people ask like, so what are you doing for the holidays? And like, sure, like that's a legitimate question. We can talk about that, but there's also many other things we can talk about too. And so there's other ways to freshen up the conversations that we have so that it doesn't always feel like it's on repeat, like having the same conversation every single day in and day out. And so that is what it is. And I recommend it to people who do find themselves wanting to either have deeper conversations, or because not all the questions are deep. Some of them are playful. Some of them are just silly. They just like one that I really like is like, tell me how you would rank the snacks in your pantry. Or what's something really good you ate lately? Because, people love to talk about food and it gives me good ideas.
That's a good one.
So, things like that. There's other ways to learn a little bit about each other by asking just slightly different questions.
Well, even Kat, something you just said was, it's good to see you. Like that to me, like I love all the questions you put too, but just like, do a lot of webinars or where people have their cameras on, just saying it's good to see you. Like that just made me feel good when you even said that, even though you weren't necessarily talking to me, but just, it's a nice greeting other than, hey, how's it going?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I will link up the calendar in the show notes. Do you produce it year round or is it seasonal?
Seasonal. Yeah. Okay. So this is I don't know exactly which date we'll be coming out with this. Typically end of the year and beginning of the year is when the calendar is available, because that's when people buy calendars typically. And then once the physical calendars are sold out, then I make the digital version available and people can I've had people in September purchase the calendar for the year and just print it out themselves from the digital version, because I'm like, cool. They want a new calendar in September. Knock yourself out. I got it for you.
Hey, you laugh, but I bought them in July before. So I'm not alone, apparently.
You are definitely not alone. Every single month of the year, people have bought the calendar. So that's kind of cool. But the physical ones, you can only get fun mail from me at this particular time of the year. And once they're sold out, you'll get a fun email from me with a download in it.
All right. Well, this will go out in January or February 2023. So hopefully people are still in the calendar buying mood. And if not, they can do the electronic download, because regardless of the calendar, it sounds like there's a lot of useful tools that they can use when having conversations. So I will make sure people get a hold of that. Well, I do want to talk about quality friendships, because we talked about how friendships, there's different versions of friendships. And, an example from this is that I had a client who became a friend, and it was very much a client relationship. So it was very much that her focused, right? Hey, how are you doing? Like that type of thing. But really like the person. But now how we keep in contact is just, she sends me Facebook messages with memes and stuff, which is, it's fine. But, I'd rather have a conversation. I'd rather do something that is more deeper. I'm more of a, quality, intimate relationships. That's what I like. I don't need a lot of, surfacey level relationships. So how can we define what we want in a friendship and kind of use it as a filter or stick to it or weed out people or, I don't know exactly where I'm going with that second question, but I guess I'll just wrap up the question with how can we define what we want in a quality relationship for ourselves?
Mm-hmm. This question, Jen, is so important that I chose to open the book with it. And what I did is I had numerous interview subjects. I ran a lot of one-on-one interviews and also a survey online. And one of the questions I asked was to ask people to define how they would describe an acquaintance, a friend, and a close friend or best friend. And in the book, I have a lot of examples of the different ways that they define those, because there isn't just one definition. Sure, you can look it up in the dictionary and there's a definition there. But the truth is, there's many different interpretations in how we each use this word friend to mean many different things. And the fact that we only have the word friend to encapsulate so many different levels of closeness and different types of platonic relationships, it kind of shows how limited the English language is. Mm-hmm. We lack words for many different kinds of human to human platonic relationships. And so to dig into this question of how do we find friends with a similar definition of friendship as us? First step is to be really clear with yourself about what you're looking for in the relationship. So in your example, it sounds like you're looking for a deeper friendship. It looks like you want to have conversations about meatier topics. And I'm sure you want to have fun and trade jokes sometimes, but it sounds like you're more fulfilled by a relationship that goes deeper. And so once you've answered that question for yourself, you have a couple options. One is to speak those hopes aloud to the person and invite them to greater closeness in that way. And the other way is to show them with actions how you want to make that a reality. And so if we were, say, working in like a coaching relationship, we would work through that and say like, okay, what are some things that you could say to this person that feel maybe like a stretch for you, but also feel like you're in integrity with yourself, with like how you invite that person to join you in a conversation, and how open do you think that they are to hearing that? The other thing you can do, if you're too nervous to like say it out loud, is like maybe you want to invite them to join you in something that elicits a deep conversation. So, for example, you might choose to invite her to a salon with you, not like a hair salon, but there's a lot of conversational salons. Some are held online, some are held in person. And there's a topic, usually something kind of philosophical or, relational based, like deeper talk is going to happen in that space. And if you invite someone to go share a thing like that with you, you'll be able to kind of suss out, like, are they open to that? Do they run away from that? And if you actually get a chance to go together, it gives you something to talk about that already starts you off from a deeper level. But
can you tell me more about these salons? I'm curious.
Yeah. So there's a number of different groups, and I found a lot of this when I was researching the book. I obviously care about having meaningful conversations, but the great news is that I'm in a community of many practitioners who also share this mission. And so there's all different kinds of groups and people and tools and resources that exist to help people have more juicy conversations. And whether that's in an online setting at gatherings or whether it's in person at meetups and things like that, there's tons. There's so many. So just to give a few examples, obviously I create tools for connection, like the Better Than Small Talk cards, which literally help you do this. There are cards, you play them with your friends, you pick out questions, you answer them together. There's also, a colleague of mine, I'm trying to think of the name of her group is Intellect, I believe. Mm-hmm. And she hosts online salons internationally. Anybody can join because obviously it's on Zoom online. I've joined before conversations held with people all over the world. And there's this very specific topic. So it could be a book. It could be a response to a movie that raises a lot of ethical questions. It could be just a small piece of learning that someone gives like 5 minutes at the beginning and then we all discuss. There's lots of different kinds of events like this. On meetup.com, which is also a great website. It's a way to connect with people who want to do this kind of thing. And so it just takes like a tiny bit of effort to like research and find it and then say like, yeah, I'm going to go to that. And I'm going to invite a friend or acquaintance to go with me that I want to share this level of depth of conversation with.
Thank you for those just ideas and tips. And when you were going through them, I was thinking, hey, I don't really think I want to go deeper with certain people, right? I just don't think it's that kind of relationship. Yeah. And I don't think I necessarily need to leave it, but there have been friendships I've left in the past. So like, how do you know when a friendship isn't serving you and do you need to leave? Do you need to make an official exit? But when you first know, like, this isn't really for me anymore, what are your thoughts? What are your options?
Yeah. So what the research shows is that the majority of our friendships don't last a lifetime. They're usually just for some amount of time that could be short, right? And they usually end through fading away. They typically do not end with a breakup, although that does happen. Most friendships end simply through fading out. And so just keep that in mind. Like if you've ever felt like, oh, my friendships are fading away, it's like, that's okay. That's completely normal.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know, honestly. I mean, just to sit there and go, okay, well, I'm losing touch with people now that I've moved and maybe it's just, they are fading, but yeah,
it's completely normal. And in fact, the average American adult loses 1 to 3 friendships a year, 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, typically again, also through fading away. It's not often a big blowout. It's usually like, it just fizzles. And then one day you wake up and you're like, I don't know if I can reach out to that person. It's been a long time. And so to go to the question of like, if a friendship isn't serving you anymore, I have some feelings about this concept and it's used a lot in our culture nowadays of like, is this serving me? Is this serving me? And I kind of push back on that. And I'm like, are you serving the friendship anymore? Mm-hmm. Like, I did a whole long thing on this on another show called Hurry Slowly about this concept of like expecting everything to serve oneself. And I caution people about being in the mindset of being like, I expect everything to serve me, everyone to serve me, because what it does is it creates up an extraction model where it's like, I'm with this person for what I can extract from them or what I can extract from this friendship or extract from this relationship. It can get transactional and it can get kind of one-sided. So I kind of caution on that. And I say like, instead, like, what's another way we can reframe it and think about that? So one is that reciprocity is very important. And it's one of the things people complain about the most when they say they're unsatisfied with their friendships is that it doesn't feel reciprocal. And it's very rare in our relationships that it's going to feel like a perfect 50-50 split all the time. I think of it more like the way balance works when we're walking, like we're shifting our feet, left to right. And there's a time in the middle when we're in between the transfer of energy from one step to the next step. And there's a time where it's not always exactly 50-50 unless you're standing still, perfect, and like mountain pose, whatever. So acknowledging that like reciprocity is a bit of a dance. Sometimes you're going to do more. Sometimes your friend's going to do more. But when it's maybe time to take a deeper analysis of like what's happening in this friendship is like, if it actually seems like it's fading because of neglect, like if one or both of you is like fully neglecting the friendship, it's probably on like its last legs, or it's just kind of fading into a time of like dormancy. It doesn't mean it can't be revived later. But before you call it quits on a friendship, I caution people to acknowledge that many friendships go through phases of dormancy and activeness, just like seasons, right? All the trees and flowers are not blooming 12 months of the year. There are times of rest. There are times where we give each other space to develop other friendships in our life, to give each other space to take care of other adult responsibilities that take up a lot of time and energy. And we need to allow each other the grace to pull back and to come forward and to step back and to go forward like a dance, because the expectation of like constant presence is not one that I think is realistic. And actually constant presence can become quite suffocating because it doesn't give you space to explore other relationships and other experiences in your life. And so I think that, I go back a lot to the romantic metaphor as well, because it's very similar to the platonic, which is that when we think of going through a rough patch or a quiet patch or a rocky time, or where you're like unsure about your future, if you're committed, you can get through that. You can adjust how you relate in a tough time, and you can get through it, and you'll come out to an easier day. And that's really valuable to have people who have been through with you and through your life and through the phases with you, because it just leads to a deeper, more relaxed and easy and spacious kind of friendship, because we're not holding on so tightly that we can't let each other breathe and move as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine a friendship that would suffocate me. That would, I mean, just being too much of a constant presence, that would be a little bit much for me. Well, how do you reconnect? So let's just say you've lost touch with a friend who you really think, you just kind of faded, but you're like, oh, I wonder how they're doing. But it kind of feels awkward right now to be like, actually, I have a friend like this that we kind of lost touch, and I heard that she's going through a divorce, and I want to reach out to see if she's okay. But how can someone reconnect without it being too awkward? Or do you just embrace the awkwardness and say, hey, it's been a while? Like, how are you?
I love this question. I love your, just the kindness of acknowledging that you've heard, through the grapevine that she's going through a tough time and you want to reach out and support. So thank you for your compassion for your friend, and also the thoughtfulness around acknowledging that it might be awkward for you. It might be awkward for her. And there are things that you can do to reduce that awkwardness and to make it easy for her. So I have a couple things I want to say here. Mm-hmm. So one is consider how to show up in a way that offers a type of support that you feel capable of giving, and that makes the other person feel the support in a way that is less like a taking. And what I mean by that is, and I'll use myself as an example. This is going back to the whole "how are you" after George Floyd thing. There were many times where people wanted to check in with me, and they frequently went to the question, "How are you?" But it didn't feel supportive to me to answer that question for them. It felt like they wanted me to give something to them, which was an explanation that was actually quite hard for me to articulate, or very emotional, or I was very exhausted of explaining myself. And so it didn't feel like a giving, it felt like a taking. And so what I really needed instead of for someone to be like, you take your exhausted, overwhelmed grief right now and explain it to me,
Right.
which is how that felt. Instead is to offer perhaps what you are willing to do, are able to do, that you can easily say yes to offering as a support to this person, and to do that offering with absolutely no expectation that they will say yes, no expectation that they will even respond. Because if someone's really, really overwhelmed, it can just be very, very hard to respond to messages, especially if they're getting a lot, or especially if they're juggling a lot. And when we offer our support in a way that doesn't feel like another task for someone to then do, is such a gift. It's such a gift. And I have a link I'd love for you to drop in the show notes. It's to something I wrote in my blog, and it's also in my book as well, around the different types of support that you can offer a friend. And so there's generally 4 different types of support. There's emotional support, companion support, tangible support. Where's finding the link for you? Anyways, I'll drop it in there. The point is, think about what you want to give. If being a listening ear, sitting quietly and listening to somebody who's going through a hard time is one of the kindest things that you can do. If you are somebody who likes to make your support very tangible and like in the physical world, like you want to like deliver a meal to their house so they don't have to cook, or you want to show up and cook for them or bring them a meal. There are things that you can do in that way, or like helping somebody arrange movers, or paying for their movers and being like, offering it in a way that's like, I would like to support you with like making your move as simple as possible. I'm willing to pay for movers. Tell me what date and time you would like them to show up, and I will handle it. And you have no idea like what kind of relief that might bring to someone who's feeling like overwhelmed and you're taking a task off of their plate as well. So that's really where I'm going at when I say like, think about what you can do that would actually help the person that feels like they have to give almost nothing in order to receive what you're giving. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I wasn't going to bring up anything that I heard through the grapevine. It was really going to be like, hey, I miss our friendship. But you've given me something to think about. Like, how can I do it in a way that feels that it's not one more thing for her to do? And
yeah, because something that happens a lot with breakups is people often get a lot, like everyone wants to check in, like, oh my God, I heard you're breaking up. And everybody kind of wants the dirt. Like they want to hear the story. And it can be so tiring and frustrating for people that are like, to feel like someone's just reaching out because they want to hear the story of what went wrong.
Right.
And so if they want to tell it, I definitely, surely be willing to listen, but be willing, I think, to make it clear that you're there to help and they don't have to talk about it if they don't want to.
Yeah. Well, you said something, as you said, there was 2 steps for reconnection, or 2 kind of areas to consider. You said, consider how to show up in a way that you feel you're capable of giving.
Yes. And the other part is to acknowledge that sometimes when you reach out to reconnect, they may not say yes, or they may not say yes right away. And to just try not to take that personal, because sometimes it's not a fit or it's not the right time for them, you know? And it is such a kind thing to reach out and to reconnect. And it's one of the most fruitful places for cultivating friendship, is to reconnect with someone that you actually were already close to in the past. And even if you were really close in the past and had a great, great friendship in your memories, sometimes someone's just not in the space where they're ready to revive it yet, or at all.
I think that's a good point, and not expecting them to be like, oh yeah, I'm so ready to hang out and talk. Just being prepared for that.
Yeah. But I still think it's so meaningful to do it. There's a great book by Daniel Pink. He wrote The Power of Regret, and he ran the World Regret Survey, asking people around the world to describe the biggest regrets of their life. And many of the regrets people had was around not reaching out to reconnect with someone that they had drifted apart from. And it doesn't mean, again, that it always works, but don't carry it with you for years and years and years, feeling like, man, I wish I had reached out to so-and-so. Like, give it a try. Give it a try. Because if it doesn't work, you're in exactly the same place that you are, having not reached out, which is you're not in touch. Okay.
Right. And it almost can feel like you close the loop a little bit too. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like open loops in my brain. So if someone's like, you're like, okay, well, I've done what I can do. And you can kind of leave it a little bit mentally. At least I could.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Kat, you've given us a ton of ideas. And I like to just say, like, if someone was listening to this and maybe they're like me and they're like, okay, I need to go either reconnect, I need just to work on my friendships as an adult. What are your top 2 tips?
Yes. So number 1, find a thing that you like to do, and then find a group of people who meet on a regular basis doing that thing, and then become a regular at that thing with that group of people. If you cannot find a group that is already doing that kind of thing and you feel like being a little bold, you can certainly create and host a thing on a recurring basis like that. And what this does is it's like we talked about earlier with like filtering at the start of like who you're going to be around and whether it's going to be a compatible group. If you start with something that you already either love to do or love to learn about, it's something you never get tired of, you feel inspired when you're around other people who share that thing, then do it. Whether it's fixing cars or knitting or baking or practicing anti-racist education and reading books, like whatever it is, like find other people who are also passionate about that thing and get with them on a regular basis. The second thing is to practice extending invitations. You don't have to be an extrovert. I am very much an introvert. And I even did my entire TEDx talk about invitations, because this is one of the doorways that many people choose to not open or even like approach. They wait to be invited and they don't extend invitations. Of course, as we talked about, sometimes it's a numbers game. You're going to invite people to stuff. They're going to have to turn it down. They're not available, whatever it might be. Try not to take it personal. It's just a thing. And the more you do it, the easier it'll be. And the less, I think, like emotionally charged it will be if you get a no. It's like, try not to be attached to the outcome, but just practice extending invitations and become a regular with a group of people that meet on a regular, consistent basis. If you do these 2 things regularly, you are going to have a much easier time making and keeping your friends in adulthood.
Oh, I love it. Those are great tips. And then the third tip is to buy your book. We should get together. But Kat, where can people find and connect with you?
Yes. So the number 1 way to connect with me is through my newsletter. I send 2 emails a month, every other Tuesday. And in that, I will share reflections and practices that you can take into your friendships in adulthood. I also share a lot of invitations to either online events that I'm hosting, tools and games for connection, resources, or other groups you might like to know about. The people who come to the gatherings that I host or that are on my newsletter subscriber list say that the thing they love about it is, again, it's like pre-filtered. You already know you're going to meet a lot of other people who value friendship and community when you come there. The other way to reach me, I'm on Instagram, but as we've seen with Twitter lately, social media can go like down the tubes overnight.
Yeah.
So I do not put too much into social media platforms. Passively following me on Instagram is like getting 1% of the good stuff that's actually in my newsletter community. So join the newsletter. And if you want to actually work with me or invite me to speak at your company or employee resource group or community group, whatever it might be, just go to my website, katvellos.com. That's my booking website. And you can send me a message there. But yes, know that I'm here. Know that there are lots of other people who also value connection and want to have this conversation and be a regular with you and like get closer. You're not alone out there. If this is something you're like, okay, this is it. I'm going to make it a priority. You don't have to be alone. There's lots of support and there's good people. And I would love to introduce you to them.
Thanks, Kat. I'll link all of that information up in the show notes. And I really appreciate your time today. I don't know, I personally am going to take these tips and continue to cultivate friendships or at least acquaintances to start.
It's a great place to start. A great place to start, Jen. You're doing awesome.
Thanks for your time, Kat.
Thanks for everything that you do.
Thanks for listening to Growing Through It. Do you ever listen to podcasts and think, what a great idea, I'm totally going to do that, but then forget about it when life distracts you? Well, you're not alone. That's why I created 2 Tip Tuesday, where I'll break down weekly podcast episodes into practical resilience tips and deliver them straight to your inbox on Tuesdays. You can sign up at bit.ly/2, that's the number 2 Tip Tuesday. That's bit.ly/2 Tip Tuesday with the number 2. I will link it up in the show notes so you can easily find it.